There is a particular kind of patience that is not the same as waiting. Waiting is passive. Waiting is what you do at the DMV or at a red light or in a hospital hallway when someone you love is on the other side of the door and there is nothing in the world you can do about it. The patience I am talking about is different. It is active. It is a decision you make every morning when you wake up and choose not to become the thing the other person is accusing you of being. I have been making that decision for 41 years. Most mornings it is easy. Some mornings it costs me more than I would like to admit. My name is Harold Voss. I am 76 years old. I spent 33 years as a civil engineer for the city of Dayton, Ohio, water infrastructure, mostly storm drains, retention basins, the kind of work that nobody notices until something goes wrong, and then everybody notices all at once. I retired in 2013 with a pension of $3,847 per month, a paid-off house on Elm Terrace, and a back that lets me know when rain is coming about 45 minutes before the clouds arrive. I mention the back because it is relevant, and I mention the house because that becomes relevant too. My wife's name is Carol. She is 73. We met at a company picnic in the summer of 1983 when I was 29 and she was 26, and she told me, within the first 10 minutes of conversation, that she thought civil engineers were the most underappreciated professionals in the country, and that the reason American cities kept flooding was that nobody wanted to pay for good drainage design. I asked her to dinner that same evening. We were married 11 months later. She wore her mother's earrings and carried white roses, and she was the most composed person in the building, including the priest. Welcome to Quiet House Stories. Get comfortable and remember the people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, you're going to love it here. Carol was diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's disease in November of 2021. By the spring of 2023, it had progressed to the point where she needed in-home support. We arranged for a hospice aide named Beverly Kowalczyk, who has been doing this work for 19 years and who I would trust with my own life without hesitation, to come to our home on Elm Terrace 4 days a week. We also arranged for physical therapy on Tuesdays and Fridays at the Kettering Health Clinic on Far Hills Avenue, which is 4.2 miles from our front door. Carol knows the route by heart. She has made that drive with me more times than either of us could count. I want you to understand something before I go any further. Carol's father, his name is Gerald Marsh. He is 80 years old. He lives in Colonial on Schroyer Road, has never once, in 41 years of marriage, treated me as anything other than a temporary inconvenience. I say this without bitterness and without drama. It is simply true. Gerald Marsh is a man who believed, from the day Carol and I got engaged, that his daughter had chosen beneath herself. I was a city employee. He had been a branch manager at Fifth Third Bank for 22 years and had apparently decided that this made him a member of a different class of person. He was never cruel about it. He was just consistently, quietly dismissive, the way some men are when they have decided someone is beneath their notice and have no reason to revise that opinion. In 41 years, Gerald Marsh has asked me exactly 3 questions about my professional work. I counted. The first was in 1986 at Christmas dinner when he asked me, and I remember this precisely, whether the city gave us hard hats. The second was in 1997 when he asked if it was true the city was going to pave over the retention basin on Shiloh Springs Road because he had heard it at the barber. It wasn't true. I told him that. He nodded and went back to his dinner. The third was in 2011, 2 years before I retired, when he asked whether I thought I would get a decent pension given how these government things usually go. I told him it would be $3,847 a month. He said that was better than he expected. That was the end of the conversation. 3 questions in 41 years. I am not a man who carries grudges, but I do keep accurate records. It is the engineering background. There were other things, smaller things, that accumulated over the decades the way small things do. The way Gerald would speak to Carol about decisions that affected our household, without mentioning me, as if I were a variable in someone else's equation. The Christmas of 1994 When Carol and I told the family we could not make the trip to Shore Road because our daughter Karen had a fever of 103.4 and we were not leaving her with a sitter, and Gerald told Carol, not me, Carol, that it was important to prioritize family. The summer of 2006, when our son David was going through a hard stretch, and Gerald told Carol that David needed a stronger hand at home, which was his way of saying something about me. Without saying it directly to me, I knew what it meant. Carol knew what it meant. Neither of us said so out loud. It was easier not to. There was a Thanksgiving of 2014, the year after I retired, when Gerald made a comment at the table about how it must be nice to have so much free time now. I had been retired for 11 months, and in that time I had repainted the exterior of the house on Elm Terrace, rebuilt the back fence, organized Carol's medical records into a binder system that her doctors still use, driven her to 26 appointments across 4 different specialist offices, and researched and installed a whole house water filtration system because the municipal supply on our block had been showing elevated particulate levels that the city had not yet addressed. I did not list these things at the Thanksgiving table. I said it was nice and passed the cranberry sauce. There was the spring of 2019 when our grandson Eli, who was 7 at the time, was asked at school to draw a picture of someone he admired and drew me in a hard hat for some reason, even though I had been retired for 6 years and he had never seen me in one, and brought the drawing to Sunday dinner and showed it to the table. Gerald looked at it for a moment and said, "That's nice, Eli." That was all. Ruth caught my eye across the table. Dennis looked at his plate. Carol put her hand on mine under the tablecloth. Eli folded the drawing back up and put it in his pocket. He still has it, as far as I know. He is 12 now, and he does not bring drawings to Sunday dinner anymore, which is probably normal for 12, but I think about that drawing sometimes. I think about the hard hat he gave me in it. Kids understand certain things about people before the people have figured it out themselves. Quiet men are not empty men. Simple is not small. I learned that at 42, and I have not forgotten it since. I did not fight these accumulated things because fighting them would have made Carol miserable, and making Carol miserable was not something I was willing to do. So I nodded. I passed the dishes. I drove home. Every single time, I drove home to the house on Elm Terrace, and Carol would sometimes say on the drive, "I'm sorry about Dad," and I would say, "Don't be," and I meant it. She did not pick her father. She picked me. That was the one that mattered. When Carol's condition worsened in the winter of 2024, Gerald decided, without discussion, without consultation, without so much as a phone call to me, that his daughter's care was now a family matter. His family. On a Tuesday evening in late January 2024, he began calling Carol's siblings, her sister Diane, who lives in Cincinnati, her brother Paul, who is in Columbus, and various cousins and aunts who have historically appeared at Christmas and at funerals and at very little in between. He called Carol's general practitioner, a woman named Dr. Evelyn Sato, whose number he got from Diane. He called Beverly, my Beverly, the hospice aide who works in my home, and asked her questions about Carol's daily schedule and medication timing. Beverly, who is a professional and a kind person, answered what she could and did not think it was her place to tell me about the call. I did not know any of this was happening. I was in my house on Elm Terrace, making dinner every evening, driving Carol to Kettering Health every Tuesday and Friday, helping her with her morning routine, monitoring her medications, 14 entries in the binder, including the levodopa timing, which is precise to within 30 minutes, or the day goes wrong, sleeping in a chair beside the bed on the nights when she had difficulty. I was doing what I had done every day for 41 years. I was showing up. The Wednesday morning that changed things was February 14th, 2024. Valentine's Day. I had gotten up at 5:47 a.m. to start coffee and make Carol's breakfast before Beverly arrived at 8. The phone rang at 6:09 a.m. It was a hospice intake coordinator named Sandra calling from a home health agency in Kettering that Gerald had apparently contacted about supplementing Carol's care. Sandra was calling to confirm an address for an in-home consultation, and she mentioned, in the casual, incidental way that people mention things they assume you already know, that she had spoken with Mr. Marsh at the family care meeting the previous Sunday evening and just wanted to verify the address on file. I said, "What family care meeting?" There was a pause. Sandra is a professional. She handled it gracefully. She said she didn't want to overstep and perhaps she should follow up with Mr. Marsh directly. I told her that was fine. I thanked her. I hung up. I stood at my kitchen counter for a moment with the phone in my hand. The coffee maker was running. The light over the sink was on. Outside, it was still dark, that particular February dark that settles in and refuses to leave until almost 8 in the morning. I set the phone down on the counter next to the white coffee mug I have been using since 2009, the one Carol bought me at a hardware store in Gatlinburg the year we drove down to see the Smokies. The handle has a chip in it that I keep meaning to do something about, and have not done anything about in 3 years, which tells you something about how time works when you are 76. I am not a dramatic man. I don't make speeches. I don't slam doors. When something happens that I don't like, my first instinct is not to react. It is to understand. I stood at that counter for approximately 4 minutes, and what I understood by the time those 4 minutes were done was this. Gerald Marsh had called a care meeting for my wife. 9 people had sat in his living room on Schroyer Road and made decisions about Carol's treatment, her schedule, her daily care, and her future, and not one of those 9 people was her husband of 41 years. I called Beverly Kowalczyk at 8:03 a.m. when she arrived and asked her gently, without accusation, if she had spoken with Gerald. She said yes, and her voice had something apologetic in it that told me she had been carrying some discomfort about the call since it happened. I told her it was not her fault and that she had done nothing wrong. I meant both of those things completely. Then I asked her to sit down and tell me everything she remembered about what Gerald had asked and what she had said, and she did, and it took about 12 minutes. And when she was done, I thanked her again and made her a cup of coffee, and we sat at the kitchen table for a moment before going back to Carol's morning schedule, because as far as Beverly's work was concerned, the morning still had to run. Then I called Dennis. Dennis Voss is my younger brother. He is 71 years old, retired from the Army at the rank of lieutenant colonel after 28 years, and he is the person I call first in every significant moment of my adult life. He lives 20 minutes away in Centerville. He was at my house by 9:15 that morning, and he sat at my kitchen table across from me, the blue spare mug, the one Carol keeps in the cabinet for guests, in his hands, and he listened while I told him everything. He did not interrupt. He did not offer opinions while I was still talking. When I finished, he looked at his coffee for a moment, and then he said, "What do you want to do?" I told him. He nodded once. He said, "Okay, tell me who you need." I want to pause here and say something about Gerald Marsh that I think is important and that I did not fully understand until Dennis asked me, sometime around 10 o'clock that morning, what I thought Gerald was actually afraid of. Because that is the real question, isn't it? It is never just about control. There is always something underneath the control. I thought about it for a long time before I answered, and what I concluded, and Dennis agreed, is that Gerald Marsh is a man who has spent his entire adult life organizing his world around the belief that competence is something you inherit rather than something you build. His father was a banker. He became a banker. His son-in-law was a city engineer, which to Gerald meant something that dug ditches. Gerald could not reconcile 41 years of evidence to the contrary, because to do so would require him to revise a belief that was foundational to how he understood his own worth. He didn't exclude me from the care meeting because he hated me. He excluded me because, in his mental accounting, I did not have standing. I was still the ditch digger's son from Vandalia, and Carol was still, in some part of his mind, waiting for something better to come along. That kind of belief is not born from cruelty. It is born from fear. Gerald Marsh has spent 80 years being the person who organized, who directed, who managed, and now his daughter was sick in a way that no bank manager's instincts could fix, and the only person who actually knew how to care for her, day by day, medication by medication, appointment by appointment, was a ditch digger from Vandalia he had written off in 1983. I think that terrified him, and rather than sit with that terror, he organized a meeting. I can almost understand it. Almost. I spent the afternoon of February 14th in my home office. It is a small room at the back of the house, original to the 1967 construction, with a window that looks out over the backyard where Carol planted rose bushes in 1995. 12 of them in 2 rows of 6 along the fence line. They bloom from May through October, and in winter they are bare and brown and a little skeletal, which I have always found oddly comforting. like a structure you can see clearly only when everything unnecessary has been stripped away. I sat at that desk with a legal pad and a green felt-tip pen, and Carol's medical binder open in front of me, and the manila folder of Beverly's weekly care notes to my left, and the contact sheet for Dr. Anand's office, and the Kettering Health Physical Therapy Coordinator James Peretti's direct line written at the top of a yellow sticky note that had been stuck to my desk lamp since March of the previous year. I want to be precise about what I was planning, because I think the word matters. It was not revenge. Revenge would have been calling Gerald and telling him exactly what I thought of what he had done. Revenge would have been loud, and it would have felt good for approximately one afternoon, and then it would have made everything harder for Carol. And the moment anything makes things harder for Carol, it is no longer an option I am willing to consider. What I was planning was simply a meeting. My meeting at my home with the people who actually knew Carol's medical situation, her daily needs, her preferences and routines, the particular way she likes her tea, chamomile, steeped for exactly 4 minutes, with 1 spoon of honey and nothing else. I had learned that in 1989 on a Tuesday when she was homesick, and I had brought it to her wrong twice before I got it right. That is a kind of knowledge you accumulate in 41 years. It does not go on a resume, but it does not disappear either. I wrote 11 names on the legal pad. Beverly Kowalczyk, Carol's hospice aide. Dennis Voss, my brother. Dr. Priya Anand, Carol's neurologist at the Wright State Physicians Group on Colonel Glenn Highway. James Peretti, Carol's physical therapist at Kettering Health, who had been working with her since March of the previous year, and who knew her gait and her fatigue patterns better than anyone outside this house. Ruth Voss, Dennis's wife and Carol's closest friend for 30 years, who had driven Carol to 3 separate appointments in October, when I had a procedure of my own and could not get behind the wheel for 4 days. Our daughter Karen, who lives in Springboro and who I called at 4:15 that afternoon, and who said quietly, "Dad, I didn't know about Gerald's meeting either," and whose voice, when she said it, told me everything I needed to know about where she stood. Karen's husband, Tom, a high school principal and a quiet man who has never once failed to show up when this family needed someone to show up. Our son, David, who drives down from Cleveland for holidays and whose children, our grandchildren Eli and Nora, spend 4 weeks with us every summer and call this house their second home, which it is. Beverly Holt, an elder law attorney on Providence Road whom Dennis had recommended 2 years earlier and whom I had consulted in January 2023 when Carol's diagnosis first began to carry legal implications. And finally, Sandra, the hospice intake coordinator, who had called that morning and who had inadvertently told me the truth, who I called back at 4:30 that afternoon to apologize for confusion earlier and to ask if she would be willing to participate in a proper family care coordination meeting where all medically relevant parties were present. She said yes before I finished asking. 11 people. Gerald had 9. I do not normally count, but I noticed. After I finished the list, I sat for a while longer in the office and looked out at the rose bushes, which in February looked like a row of dark knuckles against the fence. Carol planted each one herself. She had consulted a book about soil preparation, and she bought the right gloves, and she did on a Saturday in April 1995, when the weather was good, and I handed her tools when she asked for them and stayed out of her way, because it was her project and she knew what she was doing. 29 years later, the deep pink ones are still on the left, and the white ones still on the right, arranged that way because she decided the white ones needed the morning light. She has never seen a reason to revisit that decision. I have always thought that was one of the best things about her, the way she decides something carefully and then simply lives inside that decision without needing to justify to anyone. The meeting was scheduled for Friday, February 16th, 2024, at 10 a.m. I sent the invitations by text and by phone call on Wednesday afternoon. I told each person what it was and why I was calling it. I did not mention Gerald's meeting. I simply said that Carol's care had reached a point where a coordinated conversation among the people closest to her situation would be valuable, and that I hoped they could make the time. Every one of them said yes before I had finished the sentence. I did not call Gerald. I did not call Diane or Paul, or any of the 9 people who had sat in that living room on Schroyer Road the previous Sunday. This was not an oversight. On Thursday evening, February 15th, I pressed my charcoal suit. I had not worn it since the previous spring, and the sleeves needed touching up with the iron. Carol watched me from the doorway of the bedroom, and asked what the suit was for. I told her I was having some people over to talk about how we could make her days a little easier. She said, "Harold, you've been making my days easier for 41 years." I had to pay close attention to the sleeve for a moment and clear my throat before I turned around. That evening I made pot roast. Carol's recipe, slow cooked with carrots and onion, and a cup of beef broth, the way her mother made it. I had cornbread in the oven by 8 o'clock. The house smelled the way it is supposed to smell. It had been a hard winter, and it needed to smell that way. I did not sleep especially well that night. Not because I was anxious. I was not anxious. I was awake the way you are awake, when everything that can be done has been done, and the only remaining step is the morning. I lay in the chair beside Carol's bed and listened to the house settle around us. At some point I fell asleep, and when I woke up it was 5:41 a.m., and outside it was still dark, and I got up and started the coffee. The 11 people arrived between 9:45 and 10:03 a.m. Beverly was first. Dennis and Ruth came together in Dennis's truck. Karen and Tom arrived at 9:51. David had driven down from Cleveland the night before and stayed at the Holiday Inn on Miller Lane, which I thought was unnecessary, and told him so when I called to confirm. He said he didn't want to be an imposition. I said he was never an imposition. He said, "I know, Dad, in the way adult children say things they mean more than their voice is willing to show. That is a thing I have noticed about David since he was about 32. Dr. Anand arrived at 9:58. James Peretti at 10:01. Beverly Holt at 10:02. Sandra at 10:03. We sat in my living room. I had brought chairs from the dining room and the office, and there were still not quite enough. So David and Tom sat on the floor against the wall without being asked, which is the kind of thing you notice about a person and file away and do not forget. I stood at the front of the room. I had not prepared remarks. I said 6 things. 1. Carol is my wife. I am her primary caregiver and her healthcare proxy, which I hold in writing notarized, dated October 4th, 2022, and which Beverly Holt has a copy of on file. 2. A meeting was held the previous Sunday at the home of Gerald Marsh regarding Carol's care. I was not informed of that meeting and was not invited to it. I am informing this group of that fact now, not as a complaint, but as the reason I have called this meeting today. 3. The people in this room are the people present in Carol's medical and daily life. I want us to know each other properly and to coordinate going forward. For Beverly Kowalczyk is Carol's primary aide and the central point of contact for day-to-day care decisions. Everything goes through Beverly and through me. 5. Beverly Holt has prepared an updated healthcare proxy statement and a limited medical power of attorney addendum clarifying that no care decisions affecting Carol's treatment plan, medication schedule, or living situation may be made or implemented without my knowledge and written consent. Copies will be filed with each of Carol's care providers this coming Monday. 6. I made pot roast. It is Carol's recipe. I hope everyone is hungry. The room was quiet after the 5th point. Not an uncomfortable quiet. The kind of quiet that settles when something true has been said out loud, and there is nothing useful to add to it. Beverly Holt passed the document to Dr. Anand first. Dr. Anand is a careful, precise woman. She reads the way engineers read, looking for the load-bearing sections, and she went to the relevant paragraphs without rushing. Then she nodded and passed it to James Peretti. Beverly Holt had brought 11 copies, 1 for each person in the room, which told me something about what kind of attorney she is. James Peretti asked 2 practical questions about the physical therapy coordination schedule. They were good questions. We answered them. Sandra outlined the home health agency's intake process and how it would interface with Beverly Kowalczyk's existing schedule, and Beverly took notes in the small spiral notebook she carries in her left jacket pocket, which I have seen her consult approximately 400 times in the years she has been coming to this house. Karen held my hand for a moment when we moved into the dining room. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. David and I stood together in the kitchen while I sliced the cornbread. He is 51 years old, my son. He has Carol's eyes in my hands and a way of being still in a room that I recognized in him when he was about 9, and that has never changed. He said, "Dad, how long has this been going on?" Meaning Gerald's management of the situation, not just Sunday's meeting. I told him. He didn't say anything for a moment, and then he said, "You should have called me sooner." And I said, "You're here now." And he nodded, and we went back in the dining room with the cornbread. That was the whole conversation. It was enough. I found out through Ruth, Dennis's wife, sometime around the following Wednesday that Gerald had apparently learned by Friday afternoon that a meeting had taken place at my house. Word had reached him through Diane. Ruth said Gerald had called Karen. He had used the word undermine more than once. Ruth said Karen had listened to him for about 6 minutes and then said, calmly, Dad organized a care meeting with Mom's doctors and her legal representative and her family. I'm not sure what the problem is, and ended the call. Gerald called me on Saturday morning, February 17th, at 8:31 a.m. I let it ring through. He called again at 9:14. I let that one ring through as well. He called a third time at 11:47. I picked up on the fourth ring. He spoke for about 4 minutes. I let him. He said the word undermine twice and the phrase going behind the family's back, which I found interesting given the circumstances. He said he only wanted what was best for Carol, which I do not doubt is true, in the way that people can want what is best for someone and still cause harm to the way they go about pursuing it. When he was finished, I said this. Gerald, Carol's care will be coordinated through her medical team and through me. You're welcome to visit her any time she wants a visit. Call Beverly to schedule. Then I said goodbye and I hung up. He did not call back that day. He called the following Tuesday. I picked up. He asked if he could come on Friday. I told him Carol's best time on Fridays was between 2 and 4 in the afternoon after therapy when her energy was at its highest. He said he would come at 2. He did. He has come most Fridays since. The healthcare proxy addendum was filed with Dr. Sato's office and Dr. Anand's office on Monday, February 19th. A certified copy went to the Kettering Health Physical Therapy Department, to Beverly's agency, and to Sandra's Home Health Company. The document has been consulted twice in the month since, once in April, once in late May. Both times in my favor, without drama, which is exactly the way a well-designed document is supposed to work. There's a thing that happened in April that I want to tell you about, because I think it explains better than anything else what the Friday meeting actually accomplished. Carol had a difficult 4-day stretch where the levodopa timing needed adjustment, and we were in contact with Dr. Anand's office 6 times across 48 hours. On the second day, Beverly called James Peretti directly, with my knowledge, to adjust the Thursday session. James called Dr. Anand's nurse to coordinate. Dr. Anand's nurse called me. I updated Beverly. Beverly updated the schedule. On the 4th day, Carol was stable. The adjustment held. No one called Gerald because no one needed to call Gerald. Everything moved the way it was supposed to move, through the people who knew what they were doing, along the lines we had drawn on a Friday morning in February over pot roast and cornbread. Not a single thing fell through a gap. I have spent 33 years designing systems that move water away from places that flood. The principle is always the same. You do not stop the rain. You build the drainage before the rain comes so that when it arrives, the water goes where it is supposed to go. In February, I built the drainage. In April, it rained. The system worked. By June, something had settled. Not dramatically. Quietly. The rose bushes along the fence were fully open, all 12 of them, the deep pink ones on the left and the white ones on the right. And I sat on the back porch on a Sunday morning before Carol was up, with my coffee going slowly cold and the legal pad from February on the table beside me. I looked at the 11 names for a while. Then I took the pad inside and put it in the desk drawer in the office. Some victories do not announce themselves. Some victories are just a Tuesday afternoon running correctly, the aide arriving on time, the medication ready, the therapy appointment confirmed, the right people knowing the right things and doing the right things with that knowledge. I have been a civil engineer. I know what good infrastructure looks like. It looks like nothing most of the time. It looks like streets that don't flood and systems that run so smoothly that nobody stops to notice them. That is what I built in February. Not a monument, not a confrontation, just a structure that works. I will tell you what it cost. I think that is the part that matters most, and the part that stories like this one tend to leave out. It cost me the conversation I have been waiting 41 years to have with Gerald Marsh. The one where I would say, directly and out loud, that I have been here every single day and he is not. That I know Carol's medication timing to the minute and the levodopa window to the half hour. That I know the temperature she prefers her chamomile and the way she wants the bedroom blinds in the morning. Halfway up, not all the way. Because she likes the light, but not the glare. I know these things. Gerald Marsh does not know these things. He has never needed to know them, because I have always been here knowing them first. I will not say that to him. I made my peace with that on the back porch in June, with the rose bushes in full color and the coffee going cold in my hand. There's a version of this story where the ending is loud. I understand its appeal. I am not that man. I have never been that man. I do not believe loud endings actually end anything. They just move the noise to a different room. Carol still sees her father. He comes on Friday afternoons and brings peppermint candies from a bag he keeps in his car, the same ones he has brought her since she was a child. She likes them. He is still her father. Nothing I arranged in February changes that, and I would never want it to. He nods at me when he arrives and when he leaves. It has never been a warm nod. I have not required it to be one in 41 years, and I do not require it now. I am 76 years old. I have a paid-off house on Elm Terrace and a pension of $3,847 a month, and a back that knows when rain is coming. I have a brother who was at my kitchen table by 9:15 on the worst morning. I have a daughter who said to her grandfather, "I'm not sure what the problem is," and ended the call. I have a son who drove 4 hours from Cleveland and sat on my living room floor without being asked. I have 11 people who came on a Friday morning in February without being asked twice. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, the whole thing. 11 people came to my house. Every one of them is still here. That will have to be enough. And the thing is, it is. If you enjoyed this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of Quiet House Stories. I will see you on the next one.